Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you here, and thanks for joining us this evening at District 216. My name is Jackie. I'm a local to the Santa Barbara community and a friend of District 216, and happy to be here tonight to interview Iván Chocrón, who will be telling us a little bit about his background as a plant medicine facilitator and his journey to create the methodology that he has developed. Iván is a renowned public speaker and thought leader bridging the worlds of science and spirit to make healing more accessible to the modern Western mind. Born and raised in Argentina, he studied engineering in UTN Buenos Aires and taught both mathematics and chemistry. He began his research into Western psychology, healing practices, and plant medicine work, studying under both Western-oriented practitioners and traditional shamans within the Amazon jungle. He developed his own healing methodology, which brings together ancient traditions and Western psychology. His passion for taking a rational, grounded approach to self-work has made healing available to the masses. He believes that spiritual growth can be made accessible to modern minds through a relatable rather than mystical facilitation style. Through his unique philosophy and the past decade, Iván has garnered an ever-growing community of followers across the globe, spanning more than 20 countries, having served in 500-plus ceremonies to over 10,000 people.
Well, first I want to say thank you to everybody for showing up for this talk. Thank you, Jacob, and people at District 216 and the team for making this possible. I'm very excited to share about a little bit of the journey of combining, as Jackie already mentioned, science and spirituality, and share a little bit of my background. Not because I love too much talking about myself, but I think it's relevant to the topic that we're going to be talking today about. So I'm Iván. As Jackie already said, I studied engineering, and I was brought up atheist. My very first experience of a church was pointing at it when I was maybe 4 or 5 and asking my dad what that was. And he said, "That's a church. That's where people go waste their time." So I was like, I don't understand why anybody would do that, but okay, you're at 5, you accept things the way they are told to you. I think it makes a lot of sense that I ended up studying chemistry and math. So that's a little bit of the background. I'm a plant medicine facilitator, which is, I would say, an unlikely scenario for having that background. And I am really grateful for that background and what I'm doing today, because it has allowed me to, I would say, expand this work, which at the end of the day is not about ceremony, but more about healing and bringing people closer to a place where they are happier to be who they are, happier to be to have gone through the things that they have gone through, especially those things that, a lot of times people might think like, I wish this wouldn't have happened, right? And to help people go through an experience that leads them to genuinely feel that it's okay to have gone through that is, to me, very beautiful and rewarding. I have gone through that. So we're going to talk a little bit about maybe the I don't find any issues with traditional shamanism. I want to start there, because throughout the presentation, I might talk about differences and things that might sound like criticism are not exactly criticism of what they do in the jungle. It's more about how we have adapted it to the West. What can we actually really learn from them? But why is it important also to adapt ceremonies to the Western mind? So this is, we'll get there. So what role did this background play in the refreshed ceremony methodology that I started developing with the years? And a little bit I already touched upon, which is I benefited so much from healing work, from ceremony, from ayahuasca in particular. I since then have explored many other ways of exploring the mind and doing healing work with and without plants. And I think that's also very important to mention. Ayahuasca was my first psychedelic experience before any other substance, and that's the plant that I mostly serve, not the only, but mostly. And I benefited so much. Now, there was something here that's, I think, key, which is that if I would have gone to a traditional ceremony my first time, I probably would have not even drunk the medicine with that background, because by then I was still an atheist. I don't identify with that anymore at all. Actually, if we start talking about the things that I believe in, are like, you were an atheist? Are you, like, how did that happen? Well, a lot has happened since I drank ayahuasca. But if I would have landed in a more traditional ceremony with feathers and a shaman talking about energy and all of that, I would have been like, this is not for me. And because I benefited so much, I know that there is a lot of people that were like me back then, or that land somewhere in the middle. It's not just for the pure scientist or pure skeptic person. It's also a range. Like if you know, on one side you have spirituality, and on the other you have science and skepticism, if you will, of anything that's not what you can see and prove through the scientific method. There's also all of this stuff in the middle, and I think most people probably land somewhere there. So even if you are, let's say, just to throw some numbers there, if you are 30% into science and 70% into spirituality, that 30% also deserves to be talked to and addressed, so that all of you can be involved into whatever is going on. So this background has helped me think of those people and of those parts of those people, so that when people go into ceremony, they feel like the ceremony is for them, no matter who they are, whether religious, non-religious, spiritual, skeptic, whatever it is. I always wanted to feel that because I benefit so much, that people can do that too. So let's talk a little bit about the methodology itself. So the first key point here is safety. Now, I know this might sound a little bit cliche, right? Like, duh, safety is super important. But besides that safety is important, what safety means for everyone is very, very different. So what safety means for you, it might be different than what safety means for you, and for each single person, based on their traumas, based on their belief systems. So how can you make everybody feel safe? In a minute, we're going to talk about why safety is so important. But how can you make an atheist and a spiritual person, let's imagine we're talking about people that are standing in the opposite side of the spectrum. How can you make both of them feel safe in, let's say, an ayahuasca ceremony, a medicine that comes from the Amazon, where shamanism is not really intersecting with science too much? So either you speak to a scientist or you speak to a spiritual person. How can you make both of them? So the first one is through diligence. Now, diligence is not unique to ceremony. Diligence is true for any industry. So I'm not saying necessarily anything new here, though it's relevant. So if you're going to build your house, you want your architect to be diligent, which means you want your architect to know about architecture. You want to know that they know what they are doing. And another important topic is you want to make sure that the participant feels that diligence in the facilitator. So when you land in the ceremony, you want to feel covered in that way. Like, this person really knows their stuff. They really know what they are doing. And that can be achieved in an array of different ways through, for example, the way in which you introduce the ceremony, the way in which you talk about different topics, how much of your ego is involved and how much that shows. There's many different, I'm not going to go deep into that, but what's important is to know that for the participant to feel, I came to a place where people know what they are doing, is key to feel safe. And the other one is relatability. And this is where it becomes a little bit more unique to ceremony. So what is relatability? Relatability is this feeling that I get you. Like, when you speak, I land with what you're saying. I resonate. Like, yes, you are saying things and I immediately feel that I can understand you. And it also means you get me, right? It means when I speak, I feel understood. When I speak, I feel like you know exactly what I'm saying and I feel received and that we are connecting in that. I can relate to you. Why is this key and why is this important and unique to ceremony? Well, that is because relatability is missing in a lot of ceremonies. An example, and this is no criticism to anything related to spirituality, but for a lot of the ceremonies, spirituality is, I would say, the focus of the ceremony. So whether it is in the Amazon or in the West, the most common approach is we're going to talk about angels and spirits and demons. We're going to protect the space and do our prayers. Now, I'm not criticizing any of these things. They are key to ceremony. One of the issues that I started noticing that I would not have been able to relate is that if that would have been where I would have landed, most likely I would not have felt safe, because I'd be like, this person's not talking to me, or I don't get this person. You know, that I get you, you get me. Now, you don't want to go all the way to the other side and speak only about neurochemistry, neuroreceptors, and all stuff like that, because then what happens to all your spiritual people who came for all of those absolutely valid things that are essential in ceremony? So you can imagine that you're in a room and you have a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a non-religious person but spiritual, and an atheist. How can you say one thing, like speaking a way in which everybody feels that you're actually talking to them? That's challenging to do. And so, yeah, how would you do that? How would you speak in a way where everybody feels like you're talking to them? No one feels left behind. The answer is actually pretty simple, and it is through the embodiment, which means that you're not faking it, you already have integrated the fact that most likely everybody is right. The Muslim is right about Allah, the Christian is right about Jesus, the skeptic is right about nature. Maybe that's what they call their version of Allah or Jesus, is nature. The spiritual non-religious person might call it just simply the universe, or, you know, and if you can embody that every person is talking about ultimately the same thing, just in a different language. It's like saying, hola, hello, bonjour, and saying, wait, your version of saying hi is wrong because you're saying bonjour. It's like, we might be saying the same thing. It's just we're using different words. The same happens with this, like the embodiment that probably everyone is right. And if there is a way to speak in a non-dogmatic way so that everyone feels that you're speaking neutral, but you're also speaking to them, then people are going to feel that they can relate to you, they can connect with you. And there is one more thing, which is not only that their experience is true, but also your intention when you speak has to be that you want to be received. So let me make a little comment here. I have noticed with experience that a lot of people in spiritual, not only in spiritual world, but we're talking specifically that here, is to say the thing, but not necessarily to be received. For example, we came here to release our stuck emotion, our stuck energy, our stuck demons, and our stuck angels. If you speak like that in the West, it is so likely that somebody might disconnect from you, and that the person's not going to feel safe, and that in a way you lost that person, or now that person will not really be fully involved. And I have noticed that a lot of people speak that way knowing that, but they don't care because they truly believe in that that's what we came here to do, which I am not challenging, by the way. I'm just talking about relatability. And the only thing that they care is to say the thing that they believe. And by doing that, they will lose a lot of people. And is that really the best for the participant? Is that really the best for yourself? Or is there a way where you can include everything? So the intentionality of being received changes a lot. If I come to a ceremony, I'm going to speak, and I'm going to have the intention of, I am going to do my best. My best. It doesn't have to be better than my best. to really send a message with the intention of being received, and I really embody that everyone's experience is true, then automatically that will have the consequence of people really feeling like you're speaking to them. And that's awesome. Like people trust you, you trust them, they open up to you, and the ceremony ends up becoming a really, you start with the right foot, becomes very open. So yeah, diligence and relatability create safety. I know what you're doing, that makes me feel safe. You get me and I get you, that makes me feel safe. Now, why is feeling safe essential? Well, it starts with trust. So imagine that you're dropped into some really bad neighborhood in a country you don't know, right? You will not feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, you're not really going to naturally trust that you're going to be okay. So trust is a natural consequence, and you're going to hear me talk about consequences all the time, because some people want to force trust or want to force some other things that cannot be forced. You can fake if you want, but you could resolve the root cause. So feeling safe is essential because it just brings trust. If I feel safe here, I trust that I'm going to be okay. Now, just to engage you a little bit, I had this conversation the other day with a friend. I asked him, what do you think trust is? So I just want to leave a few seconds. Anybody who wants to try. What's trust?
Well, I'd say it's a belief that you can predict other people's behavior and that it's going to be benign and better, hopefully helpful.
Mm-hmm. Any other takes? Mm-hmm. Let's try one more. Mm-hmm.
The sense that which you're engaging in is safe.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I would say that between the three of you, we can actually piece the right answer. The three of you have mentioned things that are part of trust. You started with a belief, and that is right. Trust is the natural consequence of a belief. And the belief is that you talked about fear. It's just simply the consequence. It's a feeling that arises. Trust is a feeling, and it's a feeling that arises as a consequence of a belief that you will ultimately be okay. So in order to ultimately believe that you will be okay, you need to feel safe. If you feel safe, trust comes naturally. We're talking about ceremony still. Letting go. So if you naturally believe that you're going to be okay, it's going to become much easier to let go. And for those of you familiarized with the psychedelic space, the internal psychedelic space, letting go is a huge key for deeper healing. If you are resisting, right, like probably everyone or most people here are familiarized with it. If you're resisting, if your facilitator is like telling you, let go, and you're like, no, I'm dying, or I don't want to see that, that's so hard. You are not really going to get as much healing as possible, or as let's better say, as it is available, until the moment that you're like, okay, I'm going to just let things happen, which for a lot of people happens after they've been fighting for a while, and then they realize, okay, there's no point to this. I'm just going to let go, and that's when the deeper healing comes in. So if you want deeper healing, the root cause of all of that would be feeling safe. And to feel safe, feeling that your facilitator gets you and that you get them and that they know what you're doing will just allow for all of that to happen naturally. This is why in the psychedelic space, when somebody forces you, it's too strong of a word, to let go. You're like, let go, just let go. Like, I can't, I'm trying, but I can't. Well, most likely, there is a feeling in the person that they just don't feel safe to do so. They might not have yet landed in a place of trust. That's okay. There's many things that a person can do to land there, but it comes up to that. And so the base of this methodology is safety, which is the two key elements are diligence and relatability. So this kind of naturally leads me to this next question, which is why is it important to adapt the ceremonies from the Amazon to the West? Let's first start with how did these ceremonies start in the Amazon? So a lot of people talk about tradition, right, in the Amazon. It's like, we went to a traditional ceremony. Now, how do traditions start? Traditions don't start as a tradition, right? We're not like, all right, today is our first day drinking this thing, and we're starting a tradition, right? Traditions simply start as a natural practice born in that place for the people of that place. So eventually you repeat that over and over and over again for hundreds or thousands of years, and it becomes a tradition naturally. But the important part there is that the tradition started in a place for those people. It means that it works for those people. So when here's a good example of something that today is considered tradition. That's the Santo Daime. So those of you who don't know, Santo Daime is one of the biggest traditions in the ayahuasca community, and that mixes Christianity with ayahuasca, and it comes from Brazil. What's interesting about that tradition is that, just if you think about it, it could not have been a tradition more than 500 years ago, because Christianity was not a part of the Americas more than 500 years ago. So when somebody breaks with tradition, as some of the things that I have been working with ayahuasca does, and I actually break with tradition a lot, in the moment, there's going to be, people are going to be criticized a lot. It's like, you're not following the tradition. This is not how it used to be. You're breaking with something. It's like, yes, that is true. But think about it in this way. The Santo Daime came and all of a sudden introduced all of the Christian gospel and everything related to Christianity into a tradition that had many thousands of years before that. So what could have they said to them back then? What are you doing introducing this into our multi-millennia tradition? Well, today is like one of the most accepted traditions. Why? Because it was introduced and it was repeated over and over again for a few hundred years, and today is considered a tradition. So it's okay to break with tradition. It's okay to adapt a tradition that started for certain people to people that are not from there. Those people can benefit, as I did benefit myself as an atheist. It brought a lot of spirituality and openness, and it has brought so much into my life. But it was thanks to the fact that my own teacher has also broke from the tradition and adapted it so that it would fit the Western mind a little bit better. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the tradition. I'm not saying that we should discard it and forget about it. There's so many things that we can learn from them, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But it's this idea of it's okay to break with some of them, because a tradition starts simply as a practice that becomes a tradition after many years of being repeated. And the other question to ask is, how do these traditions operate in the jungle or in the Amazon? And what are they missing for us? So we talked about already like angels, demons, and stuff like that. But also people in the jungle don't experience trauma in the same way that we do. So if you ask a shaman in the jungle, they're going to say things like, the shaman from the tribe, 50 kilometers deeper into the jungle has been attacking me in a multi-dimensional space. And they have been, and I need to protect myself. And I'm going to use the ayahuasca to protect myself and also attack him back because, he needs to learn his lesson. And there's all of this stuff that for them is as real as for us, all of this. And when I'm saying that, I'm not saying that it is not real. It can easily be real. I believe it's real. Otherwise, the person would not experience it. This is a little bit of what I was saying earlier about really feeling that each person's experience is as real as they are experiencing it. At the very least, it's real in their minds, And to me, that's already enough. But they don't have the things that we struggle with. They don't have the same kind of depression or the same kind of anxiety of going to work, or they don't have their parents who had to work jobs that sucked out their soul so that they could feed you. And as they are doing that, they are also resentful to you for creating that life for them. Now, this is rough stuff that I'm saying, but I see it in every ceremony, and this is why I can name it. So one of the things that are missing in the jungle is the connection to what is really happening with us. And so adapting it to maybe talk a little bit less about energies, angels, and demons, still including it for those who need it, and maybe starting to include topics of psychology, topics of inner child, topics like IFS or emotional bypassing, and other things that we go through that they don't, is key to provide a more healing setting. So now when I say common issues in the Amazon, I don't want to be misinterpreted. These are not issues for them. These are issues for Westerners going to the Amazon. Relatability, we already talked about it. Diligence, we already talked about it. Understanding our psyche, same thing. I talked a little bit maybe a minute ago. Now, bastardization of the Amazonians. When we talk about doing traditional ceremony, we can't really do that anymore. So for any of you who have experienced ceremony in Peru, unless you have done it 20 years ago, 15 years ago, or maybe if you're lucky 10 years ago, much, much deeper into the jungle, the tradition is not what it used to be at all. There has been a lot of alcohol introduced into it. There has been a lot of money and Westerners coming into it. And it has really shifted how centers operate, what is important to the shamans there. I'm not saying there's places that are not still pretty pure, but you need to really seek for them. You need to go really deep into the jungle, which is beautiful and it's amazing. But the truth is, most people are not going to do that. So either they go to Peru and then they find the most available ceremony or one of the most available ones, or they do it here in the West, done by practitioners who have learned from the Amazon, brought it back, and are repeating the same exact thing that they have learned back in the jungle. And now we have like a game of broken telephone that makes it even harder, because you are not that person. You are not the person with feathers. You grew up in a city and you might be playing a persona because that's what you learn. Maybe the intention is the right one, but it might not be necessarily. If the tradition would have been born here, most likely you wouldn't be playing that role. And so sometimes even the facilitator doesn't fully land in the role, and the participant is like, wait, that white guy or girl is behaving like half like a person from here and half like a shaman, but half of it is like pretending, and the other, but I also see their gifts and it's true and real. I'm confused, and now I'm able to talk about it because I've been in this environment for a very long time, but the participant doesn't. A lot of participants feel all of that, but they cannot really voice it. They don't understand exactly what's wrong. So that's also another common issue of bringing the Amazon into the city. Now let's talk about common issues here in the West. That I just talked about, repeating what was learned in the jungle without adapting. The clash of cultures. So I think that maybe it's self-explanatory with everything that I've been talking about. What's important to us is not to them. This I think already I touched upon with talking about childhood trauma. If you go to the jungle and you get into a traditional ceremony, for example, also it's important to know there's many traditions, right? Some traditions, for example, will tell you the point of ceremony is to sit up straight and practice your discipline. And that is why you are here. You're like, they just told me that this is like a cool healing experience. Okay. And then you sit there. this is clearly not tailored for you unless you're going specifically for that, which we will talk also in a minute about who these ceremonies are really for if you're coming from the West, in my humble opinion. And then you sit straight, and this medicine starts bringing up your trauma in the ways in which you have learned about it, and your childhood issues, and when you were bullied in school, and when your mom didn't pay attention to you, and you're like going through all of that, but you're being told that all you need to do is sit straight. Or if you ended up in Santo Daime, to sing songs to Mother Mary. Or if you ended up in a different tradition, it might be something else. I've seen that clash so many times. One of my closest friends ended up in a ceremony like that without knowing it, and he just couldn't control himself, and he started, let's say, going crazy and needing to escape the place. And they were like, what are you doing? You're breaking with the ceremony space. And what happened there is no one's fault. The people from the jungle are just doing what they've been doing all their life. And that's what they really believe is the ceremony is for, because it was born there for them with that purpose. And my friend was just told to go to an ayahuasca ceremony and did not know that's what was going to come up. So for many traditions, setting up the altar properly, protecting the space like an energetic bubble, or removing demons, calling angels, singing Icaros. Wait, what? Is there a ceremony where Icaros are not part of it? Oh yeah, plenty. Not only in the West. There's plenty traditions where Icaros are not a part of it. That's actually present in just a few traditions that became popular here. So many ceremonies are in silence. So many ceremonies are done with the lights on and other people like walking by and talking. I'm still talking about the jungle, believe it or not. Lineage. If you don't carry the lineage, then you shouldn't be serving this medicine. That is also true for some traditions, but not all of them. So when you're bringing all of this stuff in here without adapting it, then is where all of these clashes happen. So I've been told so many times, what are you doing? You're not singing Icaros. You don't have a lineage of shamans above you. What are you doing? Like you're creating problems. Like people are going to leave this place more harmed than healed. But that was not what I was seeing. What I was seeing is that people would, at the end of the ceremony, tell me, hey, I've never felt safer. I never had this level of healing. And not because I think I'm anything special. I just think that I just spoke directly to them. And so at first, the first few years holding ceremonies for me were a little bit challenging because I had the people criticizing and I didn't know much as well. I was like, I have all of this criticism and at the same time I feel like this is working. So today I understand why. There's a lot of like bringing it and repeating. So for one of the common issues in the West, this is not just coming from the jungle, but also by the Western facilitators themselves, is that they don't have that much knowledge of psychology and science. Why is this important? Imagine you're an architect. Your favorite thing about architecture is designing buildings. Like you like drawing. Great. You don't need to go and do calculations and resistance of materials, but you should at least know about them. Know a little bit of it. Even if it's not your expertise, there's something about, and actually most likely you will not get your architecture degree if you don't pass the resistance of materials exams. Now, whether you dedicate your life to that later or not is a different topic, but when you go to any professional of any kind of, or any topic, of any industry, they most likely will know a little bit of everything in their own industry and specialize in something. So I am not saying every facilitator should be a psychologist or a scientist, but I have been noticing that there is a lot of that is missing. It's just not present. And so for all the people who care for science and for all the parts of people who don't care fully for science, but they care a little bit or they would feel safer, that is important. Now, why is that important? You drink ayahuasca, your trauma most likely will show up. So if you don't know how to psychologically hold that, if you can't explain to a person, for example, why they shouldn't take antidepressants, what is the process happening in their brain if they take antidepressants with ayahuasca, then you are not really being a professional at that job. So I can, for example, know, hey, don't take antidepressants with ayahuasca. But if I don't know why, and people ask me why, I'll be like, I don't know, they interact. I heard that it's dangerous. That's going to be like, okay, I'm somewhat taking care of you. But if I say like, listen, there is an enzyme present in your body that it is in charge of metabolizing serotonin. When you take antidepressants, your serotonin levels are high, and ayahuasca will inhibit this enzyme, so your serotonin levels are going to be even higher, provoking potentially serotonin syndrome and death through seizures. Then you're going to be like, diligence, right? Like, this person knows what they are talking about. You don't need to become a scientist or get a degree in it. But there's certain levels of what I would call a minimum acceptable threshold in order to make the person feel that you are the expert here. Same with psychology, where we might talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and bypassing in a little bit, but this is another common thing I notice in spiritual settings. There's a lot of bypassing happening. For those of you who are not familiarized with that, it's basically using certain tools or spiritual beliefs in order to not feel certain emotions. And that happens a lot. Like, everything happens for a reason. That's a very common thing people say to bypass whatever they are really feeling in that moment. That lands a little bit more in the knowledge of psychology and understanding why this can be actually counterproductive for the participant in the moment, even if in the moment it makes you feel a little bit better. So this is also missing, and I am advocating for safer and better ceremonies by bringing this to the awareness. What's important to us? What really are our needs? Okay, knowing the wounding healing process. This also lands a little bit under psychology. How do people get wounded? How do wounds start? What's the beginning of the wounding process? Lack of trust? Or you said break of trust or lack of?
Maybe lies or like lying.
Not having a need met.
You got it. Yeah. Having your needs go unmet. That is the very beginning. Lying, what you guys said, come later. Well, actually, yours could be coming earlier, and yours can come later. So if somebody lies, they are somehow not meeting your emotional needs. That creates a wound, which can break trust, and then you end up not trusting anymore. Whoever ended up breaking that trust. And if that is a parent, a mother or your father, that can then later on spread into all the archetypes of mothers and fathers that we go throughout our life. So if wounding is having an emotional need going unmet, what is healing?
Meeting the need.
You got it. Meeting the need. Now, how do we meet needs at age 45 when our need has gone unmet at age 5? So you spent 40 years with your needs unmet, and they have been playing out all your life in an array of different ways. Well, sometimes you serve the medicine, and the medicine does everything for you. Fantastic. As a facilitator, that's like a dream. You don't have to do much. The medicine does that for you, which is beautiful to see people come to those realizations by themselves. By the way, I'm not gonna talk about how to do that, because that could be just a whole other talk just by itself, how the wounding healing process works. But sometimes the medicine doesn't do it. The medicine brings something up or confuses the person. And that's where the facilitator comes in. And in a way, it fills up the slack that the medicine leaves. So if you got lucky and the medicine did it all for you, or you did it all with the medicine, that's beautiful and that's fantastic. But for the people that don't go through that, that's when knowing, for example, how this process works and how to operate with people that are already adults and they are not children comes in not only handy. To me, that feels like it's essential if you want to create a safe space or a space where the most amount of healing is possible. So that's important to us. The actual role of plants in our healing is important to us. So I've seen this plenty of times where people hand out the medicine, and this is like the magic bullet. You know, this will do everything for you. Just drink this. It's all about the medicine. Mother Ayahuasca is the almighty, all-powerful. And then there's this way of talking about it where directly or indirectly is making people depend on it more. And for a lot of people, that will not be enough. And so that can create a lot of confusion. Plants are tools in our healing journey. And our healing journey can, first of all, lasts our whole life. Healing is a lifelong journey. I have never met anybody that I could say they are fully healed. That also could be just a talk by itself because there's something beautiful about that. But we're not going to get very deep into that right now. And in order to have a lifelong full of healing, plants are one of the most amazing tools, but not the only ones. And they are not, how do you say this? They are not, if you depend only on them, you will not go as far in your healing journey as if you also adapt tools on how to heal without plants. Being held in our emotions, we talked about emotional needs going unmet. So having somebody who knows how to hold you in any emotion that shows up. For example, if a facilitator knows how to hold you in your sadness, knows how to hold you when you are hopeless or defenseless, but when you get angry, they get triggered because they have not healed that within themselves. So anger might be too dangerous of an emotion for them to feel, then that person might not be able to hold you in your anger. And so holding somebody in the emotions that naturally show up when an emotional need goes unmet is part of that healing process that I talked about up there. No bypassing, another very important thing that I talked about earlier, that bypassing an emotion, if being held in that emotion can lead to healing, bypassing it will only lead to keep the wounding process going. The dangerous thing about bypassing is that a lot of times it does look like the thing you need, because in the moment you might be feeling better, but at the end of the day, it's not going to release that emotion. Medications, chemistry, and physiology is also important for us. Everybody's loaded up on medications, especially in the United States. There's so many medications going on. So again, you don't need to become a chemist or a doctor, but knowing some basics about these things are going to be essential for us to have safer ceremonies. Yeah, what's a trigger? I like asking these questions because I'm really curious what people think about. Mm-hmm.
A reaction?
Mm-hmm. Yes. What else? That's right. There's something that makes a reaction a trigger. Not all reactions are triggers. So what makes a reaction a trigger?
Subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be.
What?
It can be subconscious.
Mm-hmm. It can be. One more try.
I would say something unresolved that feels large.
Mm. Yes. Yeah, you're also close. A trigger is an emotional reaction that it is much larger than what the situation calls for. That's all it is. My emotional reaction to a situation is huge or bigger than what I actually should, and I'm using that word very consciously now, should normally be reacting. Understanding triggers is essential also for the healing process, and understanding people's readiness too. So there's a lot of pushing that I see, and the person might not be ready. And so sometimes I would say every time when we meet people where they are at in their readiness, the chances of them going to where we want them to go, because as a facilitator, you really want people to transform, or you really want them to have a successful ceremony. And so one might think like, if I push them, if they are ready to be pushed, then that's okay, because that still lands in readiness. But if they are not, and we push people further and we don't meet them where they are at, we might actually slow down their healing process rather than accelerating. And when you meet them where they are at, they might just go there themselves. It's pretty paradoxical, which is this paradox is always present in in healing settings. And then last, integration protocol. So it is essential for people in the West to go through an integration protocol, which is never given, or almost never given in the jungle, because for them, if you think about it, in their tradition, when they are done with their ceremony, they are already surrounded by their community. Their parents are not going to criticize them. Their friends are not going to be like, you did what? You know, they are already in there. So they go through it naturally, and they are surrounded by those who already understand them. For us, you go to Peru or you go to New York to do a ceremony, and then you fly back, or you go, even if you don't go that far, like, you know, half of the people, you know, might not know, like, a lot of people hide it from their parents, and then they go. Integration is a very challenging process for a lot of people. For example, they might leave the ceremony feeling that their problems are fully solved because they are living inspired, only to 2 weeks later fall back into what it looks like the same pattern, even though it never is the same exact pattern. And then they get depressed, and then they think healing wasn't real, and then they go through all of these emotions. Who's holding them through all of that? So it is key for us to have an integration protocol, which is something that it is not present in traditional ceremonies. This title might be slightly confusing. I think I could have worded better. What I mean with this is, for us Westerners who want to experience traditional ceremonies, like how can we benefit from these traditional ceremonies? Who are these ceremonies for in the West? But I don't mean in here present. Like for all of us, that you're like, okay, does that mean I should never go to Peru? No, I'm not saying that at all. There is many Westerners that can benefit from traditional ceremonies. The first kind is, in my opinion, is experienced people who really want to try it because they've already experienced it. They already maybe know how to hold their own emotions. Maybe they already know how the healing process works, and they just want to go and try and experience it directly in the jungle. I would not recommend traditional ceremonies for people who have no experience at all. Kind of demystifying that idea that I hear often, which is like, the real way to do ayahuasca is in Peru. Don't do anything else, like everything else is like, that's how it's supposed to be done. Yes, for people that were raised there, not for us. People who are on a facilitator path, is the same thing that I was saying earlier about the architecture. Maybe you don't want to hold traditional ceremonies as a facilitator, but you should, because it's your area and your industry, you should at least be exposed to them and see how things go there. And most likely you're going to get a lot of those things, and you can adapt them into the West. So if you're on a facilitator path, eventually I believe you should go and try it in the Amazon. And then there is a third kind of people that are new, that they are not experienced, and they are not they don't intend to be facilitators, but it's like they are born, like it's almost like they were born in the wrong place. They have the jungle inside of them, or the shamanism already deep embedded in them. They happen to be born here, but they have this like longing or this call. It's like the jungle is calling me. And for those people, I also recommend it, because for them it's beyond just healing. It's a call to reunite with something that it is deep within them, maybe within their soul or within their healing path, or something else that is deeply calling them there. We're approaching the end. We're going to talk a little bit about worldview languages. We were talking earlier about people basically saying different things, but ultimately saying the same thing. So what we call trauma, they might call demons. Why is that? Because when a person is traumatized, they do things that are ultimately against their own well-being, that feel like a demonic energy, like something is pulling them to do those things that are bad for others or for themselves. So we might be talking here about trauma, they might be there talking about demons, but at the end, we might be talking about the same thing. What we call healing, they might call the release of stuck energy. They might be like, you're here in the Amazon, you're here to release all your stuck energy. That's true. And that here in the West, we might call healing, and we might be talking about the same thing. What we call feeling safe, they might call it protecting one's energetic body. And so for them, as you land in the ceremony, they're like, we're going to make this ceremony so that everybody's protected, and we're calling the angels, we're calling the bubbles, we're like protecting the space. And for people in the jungle, that makes them feel safe. For a lot of people in the West too. Remember that it's not one or the other. I mentioned most people land somewhere in the middle. What we call anger, resentment, they might call it sending negative energy to others. Because it's true. If I'm angry at you, I'm thinking about it, like I'm on my morning run and I'm like, oh, like I'm still like angry at that person. Like you're like basically sending that to that person. And a lot of people are sensitive enough that they can feel it. And I've been on the receiving end of that, where I am just maybe now here giving this talk, and then all of a sudden I start feeling like, oh, something's really off. And it could be my ex who's like really angry at me, still like holding into that resentment. And I've been on the you had the receiving end and the giving end of that as well. And what we call doctors, they might call shamans, because the role that these two people feel are pretty much the same in terms of what the role in society is. So this leads me to the end of our talk, which was the title of our talk, but I felt that it was important to have all of this context, which is how can we, both with we, I mean the Amazon and the West, work together to create the most amount of healing. So the mind-body-spirit connection in the West, the mind and the body, this is what we've been talking about for a very long time. That connection has always been acknowledged. And what the Amazon, not only the Amazon, also the East and more spiritual practices and a lot of the shamanic practices who resonate or talk about that too, added the spirit in there. Your mind is connected to your body, it's also connected to your spirit, and they all work together. So that's one thing that maybe for you guys feels like basic, but if you think about it, the spirit aspect is shamanic in nature, and that's something that they put a lot of emphasis on that we can take in and incorporate. Rituals and intentions. To live an intentional life is a much richer life than one where you just do things just because. And rituals, as an ex-atheist, I can tell you that I was like, what's the point of that? Like, it's kind of pointless. And today I realize how much it can really give to a person. So by going to the Amazon and coming back and using a lot of those rituals when they feel right, if you can do them in a form that most people will feel that they can relate, that can enhance our healing a lot. So this is also something that we're learning from them. Most pharmaceuticals that you find in a pharmacy are based on compounds that were first initially discovered in plants. So even though the pharmaceutical industry is not really taking plants, it's still based on using plants as a medicine. This is another way in which we can really learn from the Amazon. Their pharmacy are their plants. There's more than 300,000 plants that are already labeled, discovered just in the Amazon, plus all of the ones that are not discovered or labeled. And they know their plants. Trust me when I tell you, if you spend 2 weeks or a month in the jungle, you are amazed at how much they know about which plant is for your back pain and which one is for this and that. Not all of them are psychedelic, obviously. So we can learn a lot about maybe reincorporating plants into our world, which part of the psychedelic revolution that we're going through is doing that already. So a lot of the things that I'm talking about now are not things that we are not necessarily doing, but I want to point out how we are actually already cooperating with more traditional aspects of healing. Healing in community versus individual care. We are here in our little apartments. You take care of yourself, you make your own money. He makes his own money, you take care, and a lot of community is missing. And when people ask me, hey, do you hold private ceremonies? I'm like, yes, but first it's gonna cost you a lot. And it's gonna cost you a lot because I really want to discourage you from having a private ceremony. What I really want you to do is come and experience this in community, because in our last sharing circles, when we're sharing about our experience, half of the people say that, yes, the medicine was amazing, whatever, It was essential for the healing, but half of my healing came thanks to everybody here and how much I resonated with you, how much you taught me, how much your presence was key for my healing. So in the jungle, healing community is a given, and here is something that we need to try to foster, and it's not coming as naturally. So another thing that we're learning from them, bringing back healers and practitioners that have been replaced by doctors. Now, I'm not one of those guys that say, screw Western medicine. Obviously, I think doctors are key and essential for our well-being. I respect them. I actually did study some medicine in order to become better at this myself, and I think it's important. However, we have replaced culturally, of course there are healers and practitioners everywhere, but if you talk to the masses, if you talk to your average person, maybe us who are a little bit more in contact with this kind of settings, we know a lot of people like that. But the truth is, we have replaced most of our healers and practitioners with doctors, and I think we need to bring them back because they attune to parts where Western medicine is not specialized in. There's a place for Western medicine, it's leaving a vacuum, and that vacuum is taken, is filled by healers and practitioners. So bringing back this kind of approach to healing is another thing that we're getting from the Amazon. Last, recognizing the power of consciousness. So much happens within our conscious and our subconscious minds, which again, the Western world is not really attuned to, or it doesn't care as much for. There has been an awakening with meditation practices, and as I mentioned, these things are things that we're already doing, but that we have taken mostly from either an Eastern philosophy or from the jungle. So these are ways in which we're collaborating with each other, and the way we are offering something in exchange is by using the plants that have grown there to create more healing around the world. Because the more that we're all healed, the better it will be for all of us. So as we are taking these plants in, we're also helping the global community heal. So with that, I want to say, let's please create a world where our priority and our culture focuses on healing, so that we can all live in that more beautiful world. What I have been doing personally to do that is not just holding ceremony. That is only like 20 people at a time. To me, that's not fast enough. It's really powerful for those people, but it's not fast enough. So all of the things that I've learned, which I really probably touched on 0.1%. If you really want me to talk, I can talk probably for hours and hours and hours about how these things work. And there was a moment where this just was coming out of me, and I was like, I need millions of people to start healing work. You don't need plants for that, and that's the beauty of it. And so I can't serve ayahuasca to the whole world, but I can teach the whole world how to do healing without plants. That's why I started a YouTube channel where every week I put out a video on psychology, on emotions, on different things that are going to help you either kickstart or move forward in your healing journey. That's my website if you want to explore it. And I do one-on-one coaching for those who need integration or any other form of support. And you can follow me on all of those things if you're interested in. That's my talk. I thank you so much for being a part of it, for listening, and being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Iván. That was wonderful. I learned a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Touching on this a little bit at the end, but I think I'd love to kick us off with questions and asking you a little bit about why not leave the ayahuasca brew in the Amazon jungle and use psychedelics that are maybe more geographically local to here for healing? Why bring the brew from the Amazon to the West? What, perhaps beyond the significance of bringing more healing to the world, why this plant in particular for this community?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, and I think there's a few ways to answer that. I think one of the answers would be there is no particular reason for that. We can leave it there. We absolutely can. We have many, many other tools for healing. And ayahuasca is not irreplaceable. We have mushrooms that we can grow anywhere and other plants, and we have all the tools also for healing that are not related to taking a substance. So I don't have an answer to say this is the main reason. So that's one way to answer that. But then there's the other way, which is a little bit more, if you will, cosmic, which is a trust that happens when there is our relationship with the plant, but there's also the relationship of the plant with us. And for those of us who have connected with the plant enough times and have talked to her, my experience of her is that she wanted to come out of the jungle, and potentially because the healing that she can offer, whether it is because of the quality or the interesting personality that she has, maybe resonates with where the world is at in this moment. So I don't know how much of it is us, because at the end of the day, I really believe that we are empty vessels constantly channeling different spirits. And it could also be that it is, and I genuinely believe that this is also partially her own will, if you will. So I think I can hold both at the same time. We really don't need it. And at the same time, it's happening. And I don't think there's a way to really stop it at this point. So since it's happening, I think it's essential to bring it with more awareness and more safety.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. You laid out your methodology so clearly for us, and I really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. The word that kept coming up for me as you were talking about the methodology in particular was approachability. Same thing sort of as relatability, but I very much get the sense that there's this approachability, that you're trying to bring something that could be quite mystical into approachability. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated that. Mm-hmm. And I just heard you say a lot of very spiritual words, and I'm curious to personally hear a little bit about your journey from atheism growing up to now being able to hold everyone's experience is true and they're right. How did that shift for you, and what role did ayahuasca or other experiences play in that for you?
Ayahuasca was the beginning of it. My first ayahuasca experience was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I ever experienced. And I can summarize it as my soul was dormant. And so as you don't feel your soul, you don't believe you have one. You believe you are just this sack of meat. And then it was like a bucket of cold water thrown onto my soul. And it was like, oh my God, I was blind all of this time. And so that was the beginning. And I did not have proper integration. I did not have proper safety on holding, even though I did have an initial sense of safety because my first teacher was a chemist. And that really spoke to me. And so in a way, just I started the talking about how much this medicine has done to me, how much happier, how much whole I am with being a spiritual person. Yet I do remember, and I still keep that like skeptic side of me still present, which I believe that a healthy dose of it is actually healthy. And I would say that was the beginning. And after that, yes, hundreds of ceremonies, other medicines, other experiences, meditations, and other practices, vipassana, and all of these things have, at this point, to me, is undeniable. I don't claim to know what the truth is. I have my own experiences that ultimately are subjective to me. It's just so funny for me to think about atheism, and I can explain it as the closeness of your crown chakra. So the part of you that's connected to God, if it's closed and you cannot, it's like explaining that person that was born blind what seeing is. And if I tell you, you can actually move around and there's all these colors, it'd be like, that's not true because that's not your experience. And so that was maybe also like the bucket of cold water was also the opening of this, and all of a sudden connecting with something and it felt like landing home. Mm-hmm.
Landing home. I know that feeling too.
Yeah.
Really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up to the audience as well. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your experience holding I think in our prep call you called it you were an unorthodox ayahuasca practitioner. What is it like for you to hold that in regards to others that say that it should be traditional? You know, how have you personally held this, and what has that process been like for you to be able to say, you know, as you were talking about in your talk, through the data of seeing this work for many people, how have you recalibrated personally to be able to say, it's okay for me to be an unorthodox ayahuasca practitioner and to break with tradition, and how have you held that?
It was definitely challenging at the beginning. Lots of imposter syndrome, both feeling a pull and a calling from one side to do it this way, and really being like, but I really would have loved it this way. So there must be others like me. And then also others saying, if you don't follow the tradition or you are not in the lineage of shamanism, you're going to hurt people. And then really being concerned for that. I don't want to hurt people. And so otherwise, this other side of me who really wants to, like, it was a battle at first. The results really helped. Having people come and say things like, I've experienced this with 10 different facilitators, I've never felt safer, and that really allowed me to go as deep as I could. And that was very important validation and reinforcement, not too much for my ego, as that helps too, but mostly to know that it is okay. And then I would take these questions to the medicine itself sometimes and be like, so tell me more about this. Am I doing you a disservice? Am I bastardizing you? Am I being a bad person? And ayahuasca is like, no, we need this. And having deep conversations with the spirit itself, it's like, I am flowing through you right now. This is what I want for this moment in this moment and place. And then my skeptic side would be like, is that my ego just saying to itself the things that it wants? And so it has not been a one-off moment. It has been a process, but ultimately is seeing the results, seeing people say and see how much it has really helped to be a part of a methodology that is all-inclusive in and not dismissing anything. And it just ultimately feels good in my heart. I happen to be lucky enough to be very connected to it. I never disconnected from my heart. I had a fairly good childhood, and I think that really helped in always keeping my heart and my mind connected. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I can feel your integrity and how much you care about doing a good job for the people that you serve. So it shines through. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'd love to open it up to anybody else with questions. If there's anybody in the audience that has a question for Iván.
I don't know that much about ayahuasca, but my understanding, maybe it's my ignorant understanding, but that it's a mixture of two plants typically. That one has DMT and the other is an MAO inhibitor. I've never done ayahuasca, but I've done straight DMT and I've done 5-MeO DMT. And for both those two, it was like there was such a profound like flash, like it's so fast, this kind of flash. And I was curious whether ayahuasca creates that because of the DMT in it, and whether it lasts, because the DMT flash and the 5-MeO DMT flash, at least for me, is very quick and short. So that's one question. I have lots of other questions, but that's one.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a short answer for the question, which is yes, it does last 4 to 8 hours, depending on the brew, the person, and the amount that they take. And what's very interesting about the comparison of an ayahuasca experience with a DMT experience is that the DMT experience, 99% of chances that you're going to shift into a different reality that looks kind of like the painting that you have right behind you, with very strong visuals. Whereas ayahuasca, I would say half of the people, maybe more, don't experience any visuals at all, even though DMT is docking into their serotonin receptors. But what they go through is emotional release, is somatic release, it is actual purging, where their emotions, maybe something in their emotional body is not available because it feels unsafe because that's their trauma. And so it shifts physically into vomiting. And they release their emotions not through crying or through feeling them, but through vomiting them. And that cannot happen, or happens, better said, happens much less if you don't include the ayahuasca. And so we can talk about the chemistry of ayahuasca both as an MAOI and as DMT, and that's the scientific way of talking about it. And then there's also the spiritual way of talking, which is not any different. It's just a different language, which is you have also the spirit of the plant of ayahuasca present physically as an MAOI. So the MAOI is the chemical or physical representation of its spirit. That's why the chemistry of a plant is the spirit, and the plant itself is their body. So a plant has also a body and the spirit. And then you have the DMT. DMT activates it, but it is the spirit of ayahuasca. It's more, if you will, I think this is where it really helps to see it from the esoteric perspective, that the spirit of ayahuasca is the one ultimately in charge of creating that kind of healing and emotional release. With only DMT, there's a lot of healing available too, but once she comes in, it's a completely different story. And it lasts, like it can last a very long time. It's not a flash, it comes in slowly, it stays at a peak, and then it goes out slowly.
So what does your integration process look like?
Nice. Integration process is a combination of a closing talk after each ceremony. And the most important part of the closing talk is telling people how they are going to crash. So it's like they come out of the experience so inspired and ready to make changes in their lives. And then I go and pop that bubble. I don't do it out of being evil. It's because, and there's ways of saying it so that they still live with that inspiration, but so that when life kicks in again, then it doesn't catch them by surprise. It's not like, wait, I thought I was healed. What happened? So there is a lot about expecting what are going to be, or knowing what are going to be the expected challenges. So as you are naming those, that already starts helping with integration a lot. And then there's other tools. We create community groups and really strongly encourage to keep in touch with each other. So that that the slide is gone, but the part of healing in community is still present. Exercises, I give homework, and unfortunately it's still not, I would say, it's not that the protocol there's anything wrong with the protocol. It's still, at the end of the day, not ideal for one reason, and that is because we are still individualized. So people are going to go home and they're going to be by themselves. And I feel that by itself is already not the way in which integration takes its ideal shape or ideal form. And so I prepare them to let them know what's going to happen once they are alone, give them as many tools and exercises as possible, which maybe that's your question, like what are those exercises? But there's plenty. I don't think we have the space here to do that. I'm happy to talk about it later. I created in my YouTube channel a video about integration, so I tell people that they should read that watch that. And so, yeah, it's a combination of things to maximize the potential for integration in the already non-ideal societal situation that we have for such a process.
Can you give an example or two of how you have made ceremonies more adaptable, more palatable for Western culture? I'm curious about where the question is going, because I feel like that was what the talk was about. So I'm not sure exactly which. Okay, where it's going is, what specifically have you incorporated into the ceremonies that you conduct that have made it more palatable for Westerners?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can respond to that. There's many things. I'm going to maybe name a few. I have personally removed, I don't sing, even though I can, and I'm a musician. Instead, I play recorded music that it is specifically tailored for specific moments of the ceremony. I know how the first hour of the ceremony goes and what you experience in that hour, what happens on the second, what happens on the third, and I do my best to match the music for that. And the music is amazing. I receive a lot of compliments for that, and that already helps a lot. I incorporate touch when it's needed in moments that I know that the person needs it. So some ceremonies are like, have these strict rules because it works for them, right? No touch. Touch is forbidden. Very understandable. You can touch somebody with sexual trauma the wrong way, even if you have right intentions, and you end up re-traumatizing the person. Yet, there is the other side of that coin, which is somebody might not have received any touch from their parents, and that is how they heal. And if you can actually attune to those moments and how to do it, maybe some person needs a warning, can I touch you here? Some people might just like be asking with their body language or their tears, like that they really need to be held. And so anything that was a strict rule, I discarded it and started from scratch. I mean, like, what is the actual need of each person at every moment, and keeping that in consideration with the idea of relatability. No talking is essential in every ceremony, but somebody might need to talk. And that is how they're going to heal. So we created a space where we take the person out and we give them the chance to actually process as if you would be their therapist. And I would say situations like this, where individual cases need individual solutions, are always kept in consideration. And after many ceremonies, I think at this point we pretty much have no holes. Eventually, every now and then we have a very unique case, and then we incorporate that for the next one. But the integration protocol, sending people to watch videos, the way in which we do the food, the way in which we introduce meditation, the meditation practice during a ceremony. There's many things that are just not within the tradition that I felt that once we adapted it to the West, the ceremonies ended up becoming better. So these are some examples. It's probably much more, but maybe it gives you an idea.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There's a lot of discussion in Western psychedelic communities about being in right relationship with the indigenous communities where these practices came from. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what right relationship with the Amazonian communities that you have learned from, what that means to you and what that looks like to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a great question. There is no straightforward answer. I think the relationship we have with them is definitely not the right one, and I am not sure I do have the solution for it. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is unstoppable at this point. It's already happening. It's already popular. There's centers everywhere, both that advertise, that don't advertise, in every country. I think there's things that we can do to bring awareness that a lot of these people are underpaid, that a lot of these people we ended up introducing substances like alcohol and drugs that they weren't used to before. They weren't exposed to these spirits either. And I think there's two things that we can do. One is, sometimes because people feel guilty about this, they end up taking the persona of the shaman, and then they're like, the lineage, the feathers, we should do everything exactly the way they do it in the Amazon, because that way, this is a belief system, that way we will be honoring them. And that is, at the end of the day, I feel that the facilitator is just making themselves feel better and attune to their own guilt. I think the intention is pure, or at least partially pure, which is I want to honor them. I just don't think that that is the way to honor. If you think that the way to honor a tradition is by you taking on that persona when that is not your authentic self, I don't think that that is really honoring. In a way, you being authentic to who you are is closer to imitating what they are doing, not because you are taking the feathers, but because you're being authentic, which is what they are doing. They're being authentic to who they are. And so this idea that we must embody who they are in order to honor them, I feel like it's false. What I personally do, and it's a very small contribution, if any, is I buy the medicine raw, and then I cook it myself. And I buy it from those who I know have practices where they pay their workers really well. It's much more expensive for me, and that they plant, I think they plant 10 plants for every plant that they harvest. And so if we can be aware of these things, I'm not sure it's the solution. And I think that a lot of times where the West gets involved and that thing gets bastardized. So internally, every time that I serve this medicine, this is also something that's happening internally, but people can feel it. I do pay gratitude to those who have planted and harvested for the lineages of thousands of years of shaman after shaman who has kept this plant in such beautiful, like they have held this plant in such beautiful spirit and served it over and over and over again and brewed it and eventually came to us. So if we can all keep that in our hearts, if we can be authentic to ourselves, and if we can, as at least for facilitators, do our best to buy from sources that are good for the workers and for the plants and for the Amazon, that is a small way to be in better relationship with them.
Thank you. All right. Can we give one more round of applause for Iván Chocrón?